the carrying of concealed weapons within areas of public space within Montgomery County. And there will obviously be exemptions for law enforcement officials and those officials that are required as part of their jobs to carry a weapon. We want to make sure that our general public understands that we are here to protect you. And someone's Second Amendment right should not supersede someone's ability to feel safe within a public setting, knowing that officials who are licensed to be able to carry a gun as part of their jobs may be able to carry them, but not just your average citizen. And so I, in my opinion, believe guns create more problems than they solve. And given where we are with national rhetoric and with this Supreme Court in particular, that I believe has taken an extreme view of the Second Amendment, I believe that this will lead, unfortunately, to more guns being in our community. And there was some reporting just as recently as this weekend that there has been a spike in the number of people requesting permits to be able to purchase weapons and then carry them in a concealed format. I don't believe more guns is the solution. And this bill, I believe, is a reasonable approach to ensure that in our community, we keep our residents safe while also not running afoul of the Second Amendment, but acknowledging that we must be cautious here in our community. So the bill is fairly straightforward. What it will do is, under the current law, a person may not carry a gun within 100 yards of a place of public assembly. However, it exempts those with a wear and carry permit. This new legislation will remove that exemption with the goal of deterring guns to the greatest extent possible under local law and around public areas. This legislation is consistent with state laws, and we believe the recent Supreme Court ruling. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Jones just to make some general comments. He has been on the record expressing deep concern over the rise in gun violence in our communities, and we really appreciate Chief Jones's leadership. As recently as just last weekend, several semi-automatic assault weapons were confiscated in the line of a police chase that crossed over state lines. And again, we believe here that more guns are not the answer. So Chief Jones, I turn it over to you to make some initial comments, and then State's Attorney McCarthy, I'll turn it over to you, and then open it up for questions regarding this bill specifically. Chief Jones.
Thank you, Council President Albornoz, and good morning to everyone. And I'll just briefly just state that as Council President Albornoz has noted, that I have made several statements recently concerning what is happening with gun violence in our community. And it is of grave concern. We, again, have higher numbers of gun violence that's been occurring over the past really couple of years. We see this increase, and it's really starting to be at an all-time high. We just had a shooting, of course, last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say, because it happened at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the Briggs Cheney area in Montgomery County. That, literally 60 rounds were fired in that parking lot. And it just shows you that gun violence has become sort of the norm, which is not, I think, where we need to be in today's environment. And so there are grave concerns about individuals who would have a greater option of actually carrying their weapons. We've seen increases in road rage throughout the county. That has started with the presence of guns being involved in these types of incidents. And I think that's another example of where people's tempers sometimes get the best of them. And then therefore they believe that the answer to the solving of any of that, those types of altercations begins with a gun being displayed or in fact being fired at someone. And then I think that's very disturbing. So we are willing to work with Council President Albornoz in order to look at this bill and look at it from a standpoint of it being more effective than anything that would cause some concern of safety throughout our communities. And I think that's where we really need to have an understanding about what would be those concerns, where would those locations be, where we have some concerns as law enforcement officers as well as community safety. So at this point, I'll just pass the baton to State's Attorney McCarthy.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. State Senator McCarthy, State's Attorney.
Thank you, Gabe. I think you elevated me. I'm not sure. But in any instance, good morning to all. This is John McCarthy, State's Attorney for Montgomery County. I'm here to voice my strong support of this bill that was been introduced by President Albornoz. I believe that it is consistent with the Second Amendment. I know that we are all aware, as Gabe has already pointed out in the decision, the Broom decision. I thought reading the opinion, which if you read in its totality, probably runs to a total of about 100 pages. I thought the lower court had it right, not the Supreme Court. But Broom does allow, even with the disappointment I think that we all share with that decision, Broom does allow for restrictions to be placed as to specific areas where you are permitted to wear or carry a handgun. And I think this bill, as proposed by the Council President, is consistent with that. I think within the opinion itself, they talked about schools, government buildings, churches, synagogues as typical places we could potentially see the legislature broadening protections and restricting where these guns are used. I am totally aware, as the Council President has pointed out, that we have limited authority at the local level to regulate this area. I think that what is being proposed here as a middle ground stopgap measure is probably the most we can do here at the local level. We were going to have to turn to our state legislature for broader controls across the state. I want to salute the Council President for his work on gun safety yet again. As most of you recall, he had a bill a year and a half ago about ghost guns, and he was right. I was right to join him then. I'm happy to join him again on this particular bill. I'm always happy to be with the Chief of Police as we work together collaboratively to try to reduce gun violence and guns on our streets. There are tremendous civic activists and groups in the community, organizations like Mom Demand Action, that are working and collaborating with us both inside and outside of government to work on these issues as well. Each one of us in this call, within our own agencies and within whatever authority we have, are attempting to create and move forward on this particular issue of gun violence in our community. The State's Attorney's Office has now in place a gun safety unit. We are using the grand jury. I am particularly concerned about two categories of individuals. One, prohibited persons, people who under the law are not permitted to have guns of any type, as well as people who are underage. And that would mean anybody under the age of 21 in our state. As the chief can tell you, disproportionately, when we're looking at violent crime in Montgomery County, and one of the alarming trends is that it is younger people under the age of 21 being involved increasingly in these violent crimes. We are targeting, in particular, investigating, using our grand jury, every one of these cases where a ghost gun or handgun is in the possession of someone under the age of 21. Where did you get it? How did you pay for it? What company sent it to you? If you assembled it, who helped you assemble it? What other knowledge do you have about these guns being present in our community? We are attempting to work on all fronts on this issue. I want to remind everyone, and this is very important, that the law that requires you to have a permit to carry a gun, that remains in effect. The fact that the Broom decision came down does not mean that we no longer have a carry permit application process in Maryland. We still do. The state police are still reviewing these applications. You still are required to be of age. You are still required not to be a prohibited person. You are still required not to have been held in a mental health facility within a certain period of time prior to applying for the gun carry permit. And you also have to take a class. In order to get a carry permit, you are required to take a 16-hour class and a recurring class. So it's very important that the public know you still need a carry permit. We have been briefed by the Attorney General's office, been very proactive. We have partners at the local level. We have partners at the state level. Brian Frosch's office have met with us along with the state police and the entire State's Attorneys Association across Maryland to coordinate our efforts on how we are going to address the new challenges after Broom. I want to thank them. A lot of what we're doing here today is based on the advice they have given us about the continued viability of the Wear Carry statute. It still is alive and well. I value these partnerships at both the state level and at the local level. And again, the reason I'm here today is because it's only by working together collaboratively we can make our communities safer and reduce gun violence in our communities, which I know is Gabe's goal. I know that it's the chief's goal, and it is my goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John and Chief Johns. I'll just close with this slot before opening it up for questions regarding this specific bill. There have been some reporting on the individuals that came to DC for January 6th. A number of them have reported not bringing a wear and carry, even though they had a permit from their state to be able to do so. And thinking about what would have happened had more weapons been introduced into that situation on January 6th. It's not an extreme example because it's one that happened very close to home. So we have to ensure that we tighten up and have policies in place, again, that keep our residents safe, which is the goal of this bill. With that, Jordan, I'll turn it over to you to see if members of the media have questions.
Great, thank you so much. We do have some questions rolling in. Reporters, again, if you have any questions, please note that in the chat for these two officials we have here as guests. Up first, we have Kate Ryan from WTOP, who has questions for participants. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Thank you very much for taking my questions. I would address this to the state's attorney on, and actually the council president. When you introduced the local bill on ghost guns, and of course that was then a bill modeled on that was passed in Annapolis, and you're indicating the same strategy will take place now. How likely do you think it will pass? Are you working with the same lawmakers on that, particularly Leslie Lopez? What's that situation right now?
Well, I had a conversation with State Senator Will Smith as recently as this morning, and he indicated that he and his team, along with his colleagues in the General Assembly, are working on legislation right now. And so it will be introduced almost immediately upon their return to Annapolis, and there is confidence that it will pass, particularly with what, following the trajectory of New York. And they do understand the urgency. And again, I also had expressed frustration too with, the governor's actions, not giving us the opportunity to wait until we convene in January. And that is partly what precipitated us having to take this action now here locally. But John?
I'm gonna probably be a repeat of what Gabe said, but I was with Senator Smith this morning as well. I have absolute confidence that they are already working on the same issue. And I'm sure that there are going to be multiple sponsors, and I think there's a lot of reception and acceptance that we need this here in Maryland. I'm very confident, particularly after talking to Senator Smith along with Gabe this morning, that we're going to get some legislative action, and it will be a positive legislative action that we will welcome here in Montgomery County.
Gotcha. And Mr. McCarthy, you mentioned prohibited persons. Can you explain who those people are right now who would not be able to get a concealed carry under any circumstance? What are the things that bar someone from getting concealed carry? And do our red flag laws play a role here?
There are multiple categories that you could fit into that would result in the state police not granting you a wear carry permit. If you had been institutionalized in a psychiatric facility, and there is a mechanism by which for over 30 days, there is a mechanism by which the state police can check that. Obviously, we sadly have seen on some instances, some intersection between the use of handguns and violent incidences and an overlay of mental health. There is so that provision still remains in effect. You obviously have to be over the age of 21. You also have to take an education class. There's 16 hours initially to get the permit, and then there are recurring classes you have to take every 3 years. Also, another form of prohibition would be if you are of any age and you had ever been convicted of certain crimes of violence, rape, robbery, carjacking, previous gun offenses, you're not eligible to get a wear carry permit. So there are a number of different ways in which you would fit into the category of being a prohibited person. They remain on the books. And right now, that's what the state police are checking, whether or not you check any of those boxes. And that would be the basis upon which you would be denied the wear carry permit under existing law, even with the other provisions struck out.
Got it. And last question, because I know there are a lot of reporters with a lot of questions. The types of places I would not be allowed to bring a firearm under the legislation you're considering, what would it expand beyond? I know that if I showed up at the courthouse today, for example, I am certain that it would be taken from me. If I showed up at the county council building, I'm sure that I would not be able to bring one in. What's that law going to look like? And how expanded is it? Is it, I drop my kids off at the pool, but I have a sidearm? Am I suddenly going to be arrested? What kind of things should people look for?
So we are defining it as a place of public assembly, which is very broad, admittedly so. That would include places of worship, schools, places where there is public gathering, malls. And so each of the examples that you gave, Kate, would be included within the provision that we have stated, and within 100 yards of those public assembly places.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll hop off now. I know, as I say, I know there are a lot of other reporters and they probably have the same questions I will.
Thank you, Kate. Up next, we have Steve Bunnell from Bethesda Beat with questions for officials on the gun permit legislation. Good morning, Steve.
Morning. Glad to be back. This probably can be fielded by the state's attorney and the chief, but the council president wants to field as well. I'm just curious about the overall enforcement of this bill. Obviously, a wear and carry permit, in many instances, will be easy to identify people who will be carrying weapons in violation of the law if this is passed. But I'm wondering what kind of mechanisms are in place for people who might be not so honest, to put it bluntly, about going into a crowd and a God forbid situation, how that kind of works. And if that's kind of off base, let me know. But that's just what popped in my mind about kind of this concealed carry realm of the law.
Well, I'll answer. I don't think it's always very simple to see whether people have a weapon on them. That's concealed. That terminology really does mean that someone can actually conceal a weapon, and you would want it concealed. It's not the open carry law like you have in some states, where people can actually have a sidearm visible, as any law enforcement officer has, that's visible. So it's not as simple as that, though there are those that may not conceal their weapons very clearly. And law enforcement officers are trained to really look for individuals who may be carrying weapons from time to time. And there may be some, if we know that there, if this law does pass and there will be a location that said that an individual cannot have a weapon in that particular location, then literally law enforcement would pretty much be inquiring with the individual to see if they actually have the authority to have that weapon. And if they don't have the authority, then they would be subject to arrest, depending upon, again, what law is passed. So it's not really very simple. It can be complicated, simple as complicated as we know that individuals carry guns in their cars illegally. And we find those guns often on mere traffic stops, as individuals may sometimes have those weapons not so concealed that officers can locate them, or they locate them through other means of probable cause.
Do you think that this law, if passed, if you suspect someone has a weapon, opens up stop and frisk situations, or am I off base there?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. It could rise to that, depending upon the number of complaints, or if we see individuals that we believe that are carrying weapons based upon, an officer's experience and their observations. So it could lead to that. Just depends on the type of situations that we will be confronted with.
And sorry, go ahead.
The only thing I was saying, to conduct a stop and frisk, you need to be able to articulate a basis for the stop. you just don't have the right under any circumstances to walk up and just indiscriminately stop and frisk someone. So there's going to be a burden on the police officers, the stopping agent, to articulate why they did it, which goes back to what the chief just said. It's going to depend upon the individual facts in each case, but you got to need a reason. You just don't stop and frisk everybody walking down the street. You've got to articulate a reason why you stopped each individual person you would search, even if it's merely a frisk.
And kind of my last question is just if this bill, I keep talking hypotheticals here, that the bill passes, but if it passes, kind of what is the impact, I guess all three of you, if you want to answer, you hope this has on local events, local assembly? You know, I was on vacation. I just saw the incident in Illinois on July 4th, and I imagine that's in all the back of our minds here, but just what do you all intend to hope would be the impact of this bill, given that it passes?
Well, two things for me, at least two, but similar to you, Steve, I was at 6 events on the 4th of July, and we've arrived at a point in our country, which is a terrible point to be in, where each of us have to, unfortunately, at least in the back of our mind, think about an exit plan or looking around to see whether or not anybody may or may not have a weapon. And that's just it's a terrible way to live, frankly. And so we want to minimize the concern to the full extent possible of our residents who are concerned about people carrying weapons within places of public assembly, wherever we will go. We should not have to worry about these things when we go to the movies or we go to our places of worship or we go to the mall. And so this is at least an attempt to help our residents feel more at ease that the laws that we've had in place within the state of Maryland and here locally in Montgomery County, which are among some of the toughest gun restrictions across this country, which are overwhelmingly supported by our residents, remains in place despite what has transpired at the Supreme Court recently.
The only thing that I would add is I think this bill is also designed to reduce random violence. Look, I know that things sometimes can escalate very quickly. Marcus could, I'm sure, talk about this from his own personal experience on the street. Sometimes things can escalate out of hand very quickly. The presence of guns in these circumstances, in these kinds of assemblies, when something is not premeditated, not by design, but somebody just loses a temper and has access to a handgun in the kinds of situations and the settings that the president's bill addresses, I think we can reduce random violence as well, because I think that's a great fear for all of us.
I would just concur with both of those. I mean, I think that's exactly right. It's particularly what Mr. McCarthy just stated about my fear is that, again, it becomes emotional and people find the easiest thing that they can really figure out a way to try to resolve a situation in the heat of the moment. And sometimes it does resort to gun violence. And I think that's going to be the concern.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, we have Dario Lopez Capera from Telemundo 44 with questions for Council President Albornoz. Good morning, Dario.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my questions. My question will be in Spanish for Council President Albornoz. Council President, my first question is, what is the next step in this bill and when will it be introduced?
We are introducing it tomorrow. This is an expedited bill, and so we hope to have public comment and then vote on this bill before our August recess on July 26th. Así que el próximo paso para esta medida de ley es que vamos a introducirlo mañana durante la sesión debajo del Consejo y queremos mover rápido con esta ley para que lo podamos enactar a los fines de este mes para que puede estar puesto en agosto. Y tenemos confianza que la Asamblea General en Anápolis va a pasar legislación a nivel del Estado, pero pensamos que es importante de tomar este paso a nivel local para no esperar hasta enero cuando regresa la Asamblea General a Anápolis y estar seguro que pasamos esta ley aquí local.
Presidente, ¿puede usted explicarnos un poco? ¿Esta ley va a permitir que yo no me acerque a ciertos lugares? ¿A qué lugares puedo estar o no? Relativamente a qué distancia con un arma de fuego.
Bueno, en este momento, la ley dice que no puedes usar un arma de fuego en un área público y dentro de 100 yards de un área público. Pero en este momento, gente que tienen una licencia para poder tener una arma de fuego que está que está, como se dice, digamos, escondido. Eso está bien si tienes, pero por lo que ha hecho a nivel nacional el Supreme Court, ahora es más fácil que gente pueda usar estas armas de fuego con estas licencias. Y que ahora con el ley nuevo, eso va a prevenir que gente pueda usar las armas de fuego, aunque tienen una licencia para que sea escondido.
Última pregunta, last question. Presidente, la violencia con armas ha tocado mucho a los jóvenes. ¿Cuál es el siguiente paso para que esta población no sea víctima y tampoco sea quienes sean los generadores de esta violencia?
Sí, hemos visto demasiadas tragedias, especialmente a jóvenes. Estuve hablando con Luis Cardona del Departamento de Salud y Servicios Humanos. Me indicó que había un caso este fin de semana de un joven de 10 años que estaba en social media con un AR-57. Eso tiene que parar y es algo que es una parte de la cultura que tiene que parar y hay que hacer todo lo posible para pararlo.
Thank
Y
you,
hay
Doc.
Thank you. No, just last question, sorry.
Yeah, no.
¿Y cómo planean detenerlo, presidente?
Bueno, en este momento estamos trabajando dentro de la comunidad, haciendo todo lo posible para dar diferentes programas durante el verano, después del colegio, donde los jóvenes se pueden involucrar, donde hay un adulto que puede ayudar con diferentes servicios. Pero a lo demás eso, estamos trabajando con el salud mental de jóvenes también y con el sistema escolar y con padres, para que si tienen información, si ven que sus jóvenes tienen una arma de fuego, lo deben reportar porque eso es algo sumamente peligroso y estamos haciendo todo lo posible para prevenir que estos jóvenes compran estos armas de fuego y como indicó el State's Attorney John McCarthy, como parte de las investigaciones que están haciendo donde encuentran armas de fuego, quieren aprender dónde consiguieron esas armas, quién los vendió y cómo lo armaron. Así que eso es parte de este esfuerzo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dario. Up next, we have Talia Morales from Univision with questions for Council President Albornoz in Spanish. Good morning, Talia.
Sí, buenos días, ¿cómo están? Feliz lunes. Bueno, le tengo una pregunta. ¿En qué consiste exactamente este proyecto de ley?
Ok. Bajo de nuestras leyes actuales en el condado, una persona no puede portar un arma de fuego dentro de 100 yardas de un sitio donde se reúnen multitudes de personas, excepto las personas que tienen un permiso para portar un arma. Y con esta legislación removerá la excepción para poder evitar bajo las leyes locales en todo lo posible el porte de armas de fuego en áreas públicas. Esta legislación es consistente con la ley del Estado y lo que ha hecho recientemente la Corte Suprema. Así que esto es un paso que vamos a tocar a nivel local para prevenir que más gente pueda usar armas de fuego dentro de áreas públicas.
¿Se mantiene optimista de que este proyecto de ley pueda ayudar a disminuir la violencia armada en el condado?
Espero que sí, porque es importante. Nosotros pensamos que más armas es parte del problema, que hay demasiadas armas de fuego en las comunidades en este momento. Más armas de fuego nos vamos a meter en más problemas. Y como dijo el Chief Jones y el State's Attorney McCarthy, si gente empiecen a pelear o algo pasa o algo se pone muy caliente, si tú tienes un arma de fuego, la situación se pone más grave muy rápido. Y así que queremos prevenir que gente tiene capacidad de tener estas armas, especialmente en áreas públicas.
Ok, muchas gracias. Y a lo mejor usted o el chief me puede contestar esta pregunta, pero en lo que va de este año, ¿cuál es la cantidad de los hechos violentos que han ocurrido involucrando armas de fuego?
Voy a preguntar al chief si tiene ese número. Chief, Talia is asking if we know how many incidents of gun violence we have recorded so far this year.
How many incidents have we recorded? I will say that our numbers are up compared to last year. This time, it's almost doubled to where we are. So, in regards to gun violence.
Okay, thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Talia. Up next, we have Brad Bell from ABC7. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning. So my question for Chief and perhaps Mr. McCarthy, if you'd like to weigh in. A lot of criminal activity over the weekend, attacks on the churches, the shooting at the shopping center, 4 armed robberies in Silver Spring. I heard Mr. Albornoz make mention of seizure of some weapons. Did you make an arrest in the armed robberies? What can you update us on those incidents, please? Those 3 crimes, Chief.
Absolutely, Brad. So in response to we had a carjacking in Silver Spring, and also associated with that carjacking was a string of armed robberies that occurred in a very short period of time in the downtown Silver Spring corridor. And we were able to actually make an arrest of 3 individuals, charging them with the carjacking as well as the armed robbery. So and so that case, it was a crime spree in a very short period of time, but involved a pursuit that actually went from Montgomery County into the District of Columbia, back into Montgomery County, where we were able to actually, working with DC, actually put these individuals in custody. As a response to the shooting yesterday in the Briggs Cheney area, we're still investigating that matter. We've got a lot of evidence to go through. We're still looking to see if we can find additional video evidence, and our detectives are working very hard as trying to identify who those individuals are involved. So that remains an open investigation. In response to the incidents involved the churches in the Bethesda area, we are working with our colleagues of the Fire Marshal's Office of Fire Rescue. They are taking the lead on the investigation. We are working with them as a response to the vandalism and the burglaries at the churches, and in a hope to try to figure that out. We have alerted our patrols, and as we continue to monitor that situation, they will be on high alert as they began that last night, looking for any potential suspects as it relates to that investigation. So hopefully we'll have something to follow up on that soon, but at this point, that's an open investigation as well.
And were there the 3 arrests you made? What sort of weaponry did they have, and are they juveniles?
So they did not. They did have we did recover a airsoft gun that they utilized to disguise that they had a serious handgun, you should say. And those individuals, I believe, are, I'll double check, Brad, but I believe they are adults, and they're young adults.
Okay, so they did not have real.
No, they did not have
unless they chucked it. Yeah.
Right. They did not have a real firearm that we found them when they were arrested.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Up next, we have Scott Broom from WUSA 9. Scott, I'm not sure if your questions are related to the legislation, or did you just have questions for the chief Jones in overall?
Well, I don't want to waste Chief Jones's time because he shared a lot of information, but I think all of our participants in light of the legislation could just simply respond to
Of course, yeah.
one of the details of the Silver Spring thing, which was the chief just said in his briefing, 60 shots fired. And that's just not another shooting. I mean, that's just this hail of sort of almost like mass shooting scale of, forgive me for making judgments here. And I just wonder, in light of the legislation, what we've been talking about this morning, 60 shots fired in a single incident, how does that strike you all? How could you react to that for me?
Well, Scott, the unfortunate part of that that description of that incident is that that's not the first time we've found that many shell casings at a crime scene over the past year. We have found multiple crime scenes where we found anywhere from 30 to 60 rounds of fired ammunition, shell casings that individuals have fired weapons in our streets here in Montgomery County. And this is why I state that, this is something that's different. This is not what we've been used to with gun violence in this county. And it's taken it to a different, we're at a different place. And so I'm disturbed by the fact that, here it is, in some of these instances, they may happen at midnight or late night hours, but here yesterday, and this is not, again, it's not the first time we've had some of these events that have occurred in other parts of the county where these individuals have fired these shots in the midday hours, such as yesterday where it was the late afternoon. And unfortunately, it's at a business, a shopping center with multiple business, multiple people, I'm sure, shopping in that particular area that frequent that area often in the Briggs Cheney area. So that's disturbing in its own right. So for me, again, these are the individuals who are willing to just fire carelessly at other subjects, but not knowing where their rounds are going to go. And this is where my fear of, and this has happened, of course, as you all have reported on in other jurisdictions as well, where innocent children and adults are being struck by gunfire and sometimes unfortunately killed. And again, if we don't take this seriously, my fear is that that's going to happen in Montgomery County, and we're not going to be separated from any other jurisdiction as a result thereof.
Yeah, Scott, I would just say that our very basic way of life is being altered right before our very eyes. And although the state, again, has some of the strongest gun restrictions across this country, there is deep concern that the interpretation of the Second Amendment by this current Supreme Court may lead to even more firearms being sold on top of what we know is already, frankly, a crisis and epidemic. And so it took 30 years for Congress to enact meaningful gun legislation. And all of us collectively as a community need to not get numb to these incidences and raise them in terms of how we talk about them and advocate around them. We have to make sure that we continue to apply pressure and enact more legislation to hopefully ban assault rifles as an example, which at one point were banned in our country. So there have to be more meaningful steps taken, and we're going to do everything we can at the local level and at the state level. But until our federal partners work collaboratively with us on this, there's only so much that we will be able to prevent.
Can I add one thing? This is unique. And it's a follow-up to what the chief said, and I would yield to what Chief Jones says about how it came to their attention about the shooting yesterday. But one of the things that has saddened me is that, as the chief has already pointed out, we've had a couple of these situations where there have been shootings where large numbers of rounds have been fired in a variety of locations within the county. And unfortunately, one of the things that is most shocking to me is that in some instances, despite the number of rounds that are fired, there's absolutely no calls from anybody in the community or cooperation with us in law enforcement. Again, I think part of this is everyone in the community banding together, cooperating with the police, and beginning to build that trust between law enforcement and people here in the community, because we need the help of the community. We really do. We need the help of the community to deal with these issues and call and tell us when these things take place. And unfortunately, we've had a couple that have been very similar to the one that Marcus just described, where no phone calls have been made by anyone regarding the shooting. And that, to me, that's among the most terrifying things. We need to come together as a community. We have a great police department. They work every day diligently to protect us, but we've got to communicate and let them do their jobs.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Scott. Is that the only questions you had regarding this?
I have more than enough to work with.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Up next, we have David Kaplan from Fox 5 with questions for Chief Jones. Good morning, David.
Good morning to you. Thank you for taking all these questions. Chief Jones, I just want to confirm one thing that you said earlier. Did you say that the number of gun crimes thus far this year in Montgomery County has doubled compared to last year? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I should say nearly doubled year to date where we are from last year. Yes.
Okay. So as of where we are on July 11th this year is double where we were on nearly double of where we were on July 11th last year.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to be sure. Chief Jones, you didn't, somebody asked earlier just about the intent of this law and we didn't get an answer from you. So I'm just kind of curious if you think that this proposal, the intention of it, what is the intention of it in your mind? And do you think it would be an effective deterrent to keep guns away from public spaces?
Well, I think that, one of the, and from my perspective, I think that, and I've shared this with Council President Albornoz, is that I think there are some establishments in the public space that these guns they should not be permitted. Whether it's, schools being one of them. We can also talk about alcohol, where alcohol is served in these types of establishments, because I don't think anyone with a gun and drinking alcohol, that's a good combination. I think just as much as we think that we look at the dangers of drunk driving, here I think this is a bad combination to have alcohol mixed with individuals who are openly carrying a weapon. And I think, again, that goes to your logical thinking about whether or not you are going to carry a weapon while you're out to have something that might, really alter your decision making. And I think we all could agree to that from a common sense perspective. So that's an example for me, that I think needs to be discussed, how we further this for weapons in an open space.
Great. And then my last question, it's become a bit of a campaign issue in the executive's race. And I wanted to ask you, because just some questions about the reduction of the auto theft extra enforcement that was reduced a little bit. That I believe that was a decision that you made, given some of the carjackings and auto thefts that we've seen, particularly in downtown Silver Spring over the course of this year. Is that something that you're looking at or to reinstate or try and do more to prevent carjackings and auto theft in Montgomery County?
So I want to make sure that this is clarified, Dave, so everybody understands this, David, from this perspective.
Yes, please.
First and foremost, my auto theft unit, that was a centralized auto theft unit, they do not investigate carjackings. All carjackings are investigated by our robbery section, which is in the Major Crimes Division, and that unit has not been impacted at all upon their work in carjacking. So I want to make sure that there's a clear a distinction there. I also want to make sure that we understand that we have units, that we have special assignment teams, we have decentralized community action teams that we utilize as extra resources to actually focus on carjackings, to be preventive and be more proactive in our districts where we've had these problems, such as Silver Spring and Bethesda. So they've been very proactive in those regards, and in an attempt to try to deter it. In some cases, they've made arrests as a result of carjackings that have occurred in their very presence. And then as it relates to the auto theft investigative unit, as I noted, which was centralized, and then we go back to the sort of why did I decentralize them? It was because there was a reduction in basically in our budget that was demanded by the county executive and the county council, which was approved by the council. That was a part of that, but it did not eliminate the investigators who were now decentralized and sent to district stations to work in the investigative units of the district stations. So we were still investigating auto thefts. We were just doing it in a decentralized capacity. Would I like to bring back the centralized auto theft unit? Oh, absolutely, I would. Particularly knowing that auto thefts have been up in the county over the past year, although they've kind of stabilized this year. But I still would want to centralize it. But the problem lies is the fact that we are 85 positions below our authorized strength right now. My primary focus is our patrol divisions who are responding to 911 and emergency type calls and who are the frontline officers. That's where the primary focus has to be at this present time. But we won't give up on still investigating auto thefts. We're still investigating them and in fact, I've put together a temporary unit that we're looking at it from a pilot standpoint to see how we can more efficiently run that unit.
Thank you very much for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to take one more question regarding this legislation, and then we'll move on to the update from the council president and the health update from Sean O'Donnell, and then we'll circle back if you guys have any more questions after that. Up next, Darcy Spencer from NBC4. Good morning, Darcy. Darcy has questions for the chief as well.
Good morning. A lot of it's already been covered, so great. Chief, another clarification of your clarification regarding the numbers almost doubling in gun crimes. This is overall any kind of crime that in which a gun was used. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. This would be robberies, murders, and any kind of crime. And also, if you could say what those numbers are, not just that they're up nearly double.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, though I could get them for you. But I will state that when I say gun violence, I'm talking about whether we have confirmed shootings where we have a victim of a gun crime, where we also have where we've had shots fired and no one was hit, and we have reported gunfire, and we respond to the scene and we're locating shell casings or evidence of gun crimes there. So I'll be more than happy to try to get these statistics for you all to give you sort of what that is, but it similarly centers around the fact that this is these are the gun violence that's utilized in homicides, aggravated assaults, as well as non-contact assaults that have occurred, where we've had some cases where, as Mr. McCarthy noted, that no victims even came forward that said that they were shot at, though we believe that there's evidence to suggest that there were victims in these particular incidents.
And Chief, you mentioned, and we're talking about this legislation, and anecdotally, and I guess we've seen some numbers where there is interest among people in the public to get one of these permits. I mean, there are hoops that you have to jump through to get a permit. You can't just walk in and get it. There's training and all that. But do you think that that could be tied into people's overall feeling of feeling less safe in general, that they feel like they need to protect themselves in some way? You mentioned that your numbers are down. You're are we reaching that tipping point? We've talked about the morale and recruitment and retention. Are we reaching a point where people are feeling very unsafe, to where they may feel they need to take measures to protect themselves?
Well, I mean, it's a perception, it's a reality that I think is a reality that people probably in their minds think that having a gun will make them more safe. And it is an interesting debate, I think, that a lot of people like to have from that perspective. The question is, when people are carrying a weapon, how efficient are you in really when it comes to these high intensity type of situations to be able to handle a weapon? Just because you go, and in fact, I get it that there is training that's done by the state. But again, we train as police officers, we train often to utilize your weapons and to use it in a safe manner. I don't know if I have complete confidence that I know some individuals that I know that actually probably carry weapons they actually scare me more than I think that they do to protect themselves or to protect anybody else from their families. Because I just don't think that their efficiency, even though they may believe in their hearts, is like, it's like being, you get older and you think that you can run a marathon. Your mind tells you one thing, but your body tells you something different. And so sometimes I think people believe that that the gun is going to protect them. But again, in any given situation, that can be debatable, because timing has to be everything, that you have that gun available and accessible to you at the very moment that you think you need it the most. So I get it. I understand, particularly in today's environment where we are. But again, just like we have to be careful as police officers, there's a thing called blue on blue, that you have officers that are off duty, that are sometimes will put themselves in a situation, and when a actual officer in uniform responds there, then there could be a confrontation between two police officers unbeknownst to the other if we're not trained properly to know that officer's off duty and has a gun. And that's a grave concern that we have always had in the law enforcement community. So that could be the same situation where you might have a good Samaritan trying to do something, but when a police officer is there, they may not know the good Samaritan from somebody else that might be creating a problem in the community. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into gun safety, and that's a concern of mine.
Great. Darcy, was that the last of your question there?
Yeah, I just was wondering, we just don't know which way things are going to go, and we haven't asked anyone what their thoughts are beyond this meeting. But just one thing came to mind, like small business owners, who may have a gun, they have cash business or what have you, and maybe in a shopping center like Burtonsville, like where it happened last night, they have a gun, to protect their business. Would this affect them as well?
Well, and I would just say in that regards, Darcy, that's already sort of embedded in what happens now with concealed carry permits, that those business owners can apply to the states, to the state police for a concealed weapon, and many of them do, and are granted those actual requests. So that's something I think what's being proposed now, or really what the governor has allowed a wider range of citizens to be able to have guns compared to those who may have more of a specific purpose, as noted, like a business owner to protect when they're carrying large amounts of cash or things of that nature.
Great. Thank you, Darcy, for your questions.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to Council President Albornoz to continue with his update. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And John and Chief Jones, I know you guys have to bounce off. I really appreciate you both being here this morning and answering those questions regarding a very important topic and one that we need to continue to shed light on. So I'll now move on. I'm going to summarize some of the activities before the council, because I'm sure some of the members of the media probably have to hop off too. And thank you so much, for your patience, Mr. O'Donnell. We really appreciate that. I'm going to turn it over to you in just a couple of moments. But I do have a couple of other announcements. So tomorrow will be a busy day on the council. We will be also, at the request of the county executive, introducing Expedited Bill 2222, landlord-tenant relations limitations on rent increase that would extend the 4.4% cap by an additional 6 months. And so that will be officially introduced tomorrow. And there is also a special appropriation that we are introducing, again, at the request of the county executive, but with support of the council, to provide $1 million to our Department of Health and Human Services to assist with reproductive rights and reproductive health and related services here in Montgomery County for assistance for access to abortions. And so that will be introduced tomorrow as well. And we have a number of public hearings tomorrow that I want to just a couple of which highlight. We will be having a public hearing on the private security camera incentive program. There will also be a public hearing regarding the legislation to enhance lactation rooms in county buildings. and also a public hearing on legislation on personnel and human resources paid parental leave. And I'll note also, just to remind the public, that we are in the midst of early voting. Early voting has commenced here in Montgomery County. It will be happening until July 14th. And there are 14 voting locations. You can go to the Montgomery County Board of Elections website in order to find the location closest to you. My understanding is, as of Friday, there had been more than 100,000 absentee ballots requested, which is a more than 10-fold rise since 2018. And there is some evidence that a number of our residents are choosing that option to vote, which we certainly, we're fortunate to have many different options to vote here in our community. And then, of course, Election Day is on the 19th as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. O'Donnell to provide his update from public health, and then open up for questions, any last questions from reporters this morning, or this afternoon now. Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, President Albornoz. So as a quick update on what we are seeing with the most recent transmissions in the county, our total number, our transmissions rate per 100,000 has been coming down over the last several weeks. We saw last week it started to come down after being leveled for a bit. We actually dropped below the 200 per 100,000. Again, a reminder, these are just the PCR tests being done. As more and more individuals do rapid antigen testing, and if they're not reporting those, well, none of those, even if they're reported, they're not being counted in the state's PCR numbers. But we just know a lot more people are doing rapid antigens now. And often if they get a result from that, they're not doing a follow-up PCR, which is fine, but we just take that with an understanding that these do not capture all the transmissions. We have, however, seen after a period of some decline in hospitalizations, we've seen those hospitalizations begin to increase again. Now, this data from our dashboard goes back to Friday. However, we have been looking at more recent data that was reported from our hospitals yesterday. Those hospitalizations have increased by 22 acute care cases and 6 ICU cases within our hospitals. Again, these are not all of our cases. There's also cases at the alternate care site in Tacoma Park, which is now up to 58 patients. And not all of these patients are necessarily in the hospital because of COVID. Some of them may be there for other reasons and also have a COVID diagnosis. But again, that does create challenges for our hospitals because we have to isolate these individuals from other patients. And so I can say on behalf of our hospitals, they are feeling this increase in patients already, and strongly encouraging any of our residents, if you are just in need of testing and you're not looking for additional care, please go to a testing site for the testing and not to a hospital, so that we can reserve those accessibility of care to those patients who are more acutely ill. As we mentioned last week, and these forecasts get updated generally Tuesday afternoon by the CDC. So I don't have new data, but we are looking across the nation at most of our cases now being in that BA5 and some BA4 realm. So unfortunately, that means that individuals who maybe were infected by one of those previous strains over the last few months could be susceptible for a reinfection with this newer strain. And so we're asking people to please, again, be cautious with their activities, particularly those who are at higher risk for severe illness. When you're out in crowded places, it's a good opportunity to wear one of those high quality masks to protect yourselves. And again, of course, for everyone to stay up to date on their vaccinations. Just updating the death rates, we have seen over the last 2 months some increases in Montgomery County and in the state as a result of that very high amount of activity related to the previous set of variants. Now we'll start to see some impact from the more recent BA4 and BA5. Just to remind people, we are tracking those, and we are, of course, this is the most important thing. We're trying to keep as low as possible. We have, on Friday, we got our latest updates from the state on vaccination levels. These are for our most recent 2 groups of pediatric vaccinations. You can see that for the 5 to 11-year-olds whom we've been vaccinating since back in early November of last year, they have come out or their parents have come out with them in large numbers in Montgomery County to get those first 2 doses. They're now, many of these children are eligible for booster doses. So we're just reminding parents that it is important because of the waning immunity for all ages to get those boosters. With our under 5, this is now reflecting about 2 weeks worth of data for vaccinations. Again, parents in our county have brought their children out to be vaccinated, many of whom are going to pediatricians as well. And so lots of opportunities for that. I just wanted to share with everyone, we're continuing to do our vaccinations for that very young group, that 4 and under group, at both elementary schools on Wednesday and on the weekends at middle and high schools. And so just sharing our schedule there. We already have some kids who are coming back for their second Pfizer shot this weekend. So we're excited about that, and really hoping to continue to get a lot of our kids vaccinated. That's all the updates I have right now, but happy to answer questions when we get to that point.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. O'Donnell. Reporter, if we were not able to answer any of the questions that you had regarding the gun permit legislation, some questions were noted in the chat, please just reach out to respective offices about that. But if you do have any questions right now regarding the council president's update or any questions about the health update, you can come forward and ask at this moment. Are there any questions, additional questions regarding that? Okay, Kate Ryan from WTOP. Hey, Kate, how are you doing again?
Not unmuted. There we go. I have a quick question. You didn't bring this one up, but I know it's on the agenda tomorrow. Food resiliency. That is on final reading tomorrow, right? 3rd and final reading. And just a real quick question on what our stats say about the number of people who are not who don't have access to food on a regular basis, and how will this bill help them?
Thanks, Kate. Yes, so we are voting tomorrow to formally establish the Office of Food Resilience, which will serve as a coordinating body both within government, but also in partnership with our nonprofit organizations to enhance our system of food resiliency in the community so that more people will be able to, the providers themselves will be able to better access data, but also access other resources they may not be able to secure on their own. We announced last week that we're also launching an initiative to establish a blueprint that will take us to be able to effectively say that we can end childhood hunger in Montgomery County within the next 4 years. And we need to have universal meals within schools to be able to fully be able to implement that with fidelity. But I'm confident that with this new Office of Food Resilience and the coordination among different organizations, we can address the needs. And right now, as we speak, there are about 40,000 kids, children and youth in Montgomery County that are not sure where their next meal is going to come from. And we noticed throughout the pandemic that it was families in particular that had the most significant issues of food insecurity here in Montgomery County. So we're confident that this office will make a huge difference. And this is going to be a continued effort by this council. We've appropriated over $4 million in this budget, and we've already been given a notice by the executive branch that there will likely be more resources needed this year to address those needs in the community.
Got it. And very quickly, The last time I was working on this particular topic, I think we have 1/3 of Montgomery County public school children who are on free and reduced meals. The 40,000 children you're talking about, that's a separate statistics from this, correct?
That's a separate statistic. That's correct.
And again, overall families who are hungry right now, do we know? Are we saying?
I'll follow up with the specific number, Kate. We actually, I don't have it right at my fingertips. We reported on it at an event that we were at recently, but we are concerned about the end of the universal meals program that had been established throughout the pandemic within our school system. We are reinforcing those efforts through different programs and services that we're offering through the Food Council and through this new Office of Food Resiliency in the county to try and shore up some of the gaps that have been created because of the change in the policy at the national level. But we'll get back to you with specific numbers.
Okay. And again, is it fair to say that this bill is really a response of that concern? You saw the needs clearly illustrated with the pandemic. We had people and the folks who have been on boots on the ground for a long time, NANA, the Food Council, local farmers kind of banding together. Is this kind of an outgrowth of that? Is it fair to say this is a direct outgrowth of that?
Yes, this bill is a direct outgrowth of the need that we saw throughout the pandemic, but also the systems, the organizations that entered into this space and that need help with greater coordination at the county level. So this office will help address both of those issues, addressing the immediate need that's on the ground, but more strategically coordinate the incredible organizations that are doing this work.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, Kate. Are there any other reporters who have any more additional questions regarding the update or the COVID health update as well? Going once? Going twice?
Actually, can I just follow up on that then?
No problem.
We've talked about some of the fact that the latest variant is one that, oops, you thought you'd built up that immunity and this variant doesn't care. Mr. O'Donnell, do I have that right?
Yeah, I think, in our community, we have such a high vaccination rate and a high booster rate. We'd like to see a little higher, but we have a lot of immunity gain through that. And also a lot of people who have been infected, even with that. I think now, as we see these new variants going forward, if it's a variant of note, it's one that is evading that initial immunity. Now, the good news is it does appear that the vaccines continue to help people respond once they get infected, help them respond quicker before the infection can take as large a toll as it has in the past. But the opportunity for a breakthrough infection will continue with each of these new variants, and BA4 and BA5 do appear to, again, evade that initial immunity, which is why it is so important for people to have that boosted immunity to help them respond quickly afterwards.
Got it. Will the current vaccines, though, defend against this latest variant effectively?
Well, I think the point that we're making here is there's both the initial recognition of the variant, and then there's the body's secondary immune response once it does recognize it, and how quickly can it develop an effective immune response to it. And what we've seen so far, and I think based on the data that we've seen in other places, the BA4 and 5 have been, is that there is not as many serious illnesses as we had before we had the vaccines. So it does indicate that underlying immunity does kick in at some point and help out. Again, we're watching closely, and we are concerned at seeing the hospitalization numbers go up right now. I believe the report was that we were somewhere at 500 plus hospitalizations across Maryland with a COVID diagnosis. And it's not completely clear whether they're there with COVID or for COVID, or they also have COVID. But that number's higher than at the lower points where we had only 100 people across the state. But it's way, way, way lower than when we were at the height of this back in December and January, where we had, several thousand who were hospitalized. So we are concerned when we start to see it go up like this, and we're tracking on that. And certainly, if it does appear that it's going to cause more hospitalizations than these previous variants, more serious illness, we do want to get that word out. Right now, we're monitoring the situation and trying to see how that plays out. And as such, we're still recommending individuals who are at higher risk for complications should continue to take additional precautions. They, of course, should be up to date on their vaccinations, but when they go into a more crowded place, wearing a mask and doing hand disinfection afterwards, those are still in play and those are still recommended.
Got it. Last unrelated question to the council president. Are you concerned I'll just say concerned about the low turnout for the in-person early voting so far? I think one day over the weekend, I think they had just 2 people show up at one of the early voting centers by, I want to say, noon or 2 p.m. Is this an issue of concern for you?
It is. The numbers are low. And although we do think a lot of that will be made up in people that decide to vote by mail, because there has, as I said, been a 10-fold increase in the number of people that have requested mail-in ballots from 4 years ago. And people got much more used to the rhythm of mail-in ballots during the 2020 election cycle in the midst of the pandemic. But we are seeing, pretty low numbers at our early voting sites as compared to 4 years ago. And there is some belief that there were a number of people on vacation this past week. It was the 4th of July week. It, I believe, is among the busiest vacation weeks of the year at the Delaware beaches and Ocean City. So, there may be folks that are coming back in town to vote, but we were always concerned at the outset with moving the primary from June to July, that would have an impact on voter turnout. And it appears that so far anyways, that is the case, but it is not too late to vote. And we very much encourage our residents to be able to come and visit one of our early voting sites. There are 14 of them. If they have requested a mail-in ballot, they can submit those in one of the drop boxes or put it in the mail itself. And there are still, I believe, 6 more days to go for people that would like to still request a mail-in ballot. They can do so. The deadline has not been met yet for that. And we encourage people to come out and vote. We know that it is so critically important to our democracy, particularly with everything that's happening in the world right now. And so much of what impacts our local residents happens at the local level. And during gubernatorial election cycles, which we are in now, is when most of our local elected positions are determined. So we do encourage people to come out and turn out. But I am concerned with the numbers that we've seen thus far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Any other reporters have any additional questions? Please come forward. Going once, going twice. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to you, Council President Albornoz, to close us out. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jordan. Kate, I should have mentioned that in addition to addressing the immediate emergency response on food insecurity, this Office of Food Resilience is also going to address some of those systemic issues that cause food insecurity in the first place. So we're in this for the long haul to help address this overall issue holistically. But I do want to, I did not mention at the beginning of my comments, and I meant to, that I was deeply troubled by the incidences that had taken place and the vandalism at our churches this past weekend. That type of vandalism cannot be accepted in any way, shape, or form. And we do appreciate all the efforts of law enforcement and encourage anybody that has information to please come forward to law enforcement and provide and go to their tip line, which is 240-777-2263. Thank you all very much. We will have our full session before council tomorrow. We will be beginning in the afternoon, not in the morning. We have a couple of proclamations we'll be giving tomorrow as well. Then we will be off on the 19th for voting day, and then our final session before our summer recess is on July 26th. So lots going on in the county, lots going on in the world. Thank you all very much for the important work that you do every day. Have a good day.